They say every man has a price. For 15 years, mine was 50,000 a week and a clean extraction. I was a ghost in a tactical vest, a man who lived in the silence between heartbeats. I didn't care who I was protecting. To me, a life was just a set of vitals on a monitor. Until Gabriel. He wasn't a politician or a kingpin. He was just a man who saw a truth that the world wanted to bury. When I first looked into his eyes, I didn't see a client. I saw the person I used to be before the world turned me into a weapon. Now there's an army of shadows closing in on this safe house. They think they're coming for a witness. They don't realize they're coming for the only thing that makes me feel human. And I promise you this, they will have to burn the world down before they lay a finger on him.
The rain in Manhattan didn't just fall. It felt like a heavy, cold hand pressing the life out of the city. Down on Fifth Avenue, the yellow taxis looked like frantic beetles scurrying through the gray mist, their horns muted by the thick, humid air. I stood in the deep indentation of a limestone doorway, a shadow among shadows. My name is Elias, and for 15 years I have been the invisible wall between the powerful and the dead. I checked the tactical watch on my left wrist. The digits glowed a dull, radioactive green, 02:14 a.m. In the penthouse 30 stories above me lived Gabriel Thorne. I had spent the last 48 hours studying his life. I knew he liked his coffee black. I knew he slept with the window cracked exactly 2 inches, even in winter. And I knew that 3 hours ago he had accidentally signed his own death warrant by opening an encrypted server belonging to the Vane Syndicate. He was a ghost who didn't know he was dead yet. I stepped out of the doorway. My boots made no sound on the wet pavement. I moved with a practiced predatory grace, a result of a decade in special ops and another 5 in the private sector. The lobby of Gabriel's building was a cathedral of marble and glass. The security guard was a retired cop who was currently more interested in his crossword puzzle than the perimeter. I slipped past him during a blink, moving into the service stairwell. 30 flights of stairs is a long time to think. I focused on my breathing. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 4. It keeps the heart rate steady. It keeps the mind cold. When I reached the penthouse door, I didn't use a key. I used a Slim Jim and a digital bypass. The lock clicked with a soft, metallic sigh. I stepped into a world that smelled of expensive cologne and stale panic.
The apartment was sprawling. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of a city that looked like a motherboard of lights. Gabriel was hunched over a workstation in the corner, the blue light of 4 monitors casting a ghostly, flickering pallor over his sharp features. He was thin, wearing a gray t-shirt that hung off his frame, and his fingers were flying across the keyboard with a desperate, frantic energy. "The encryption is shifting," he muttered to himself, unaware I was standing 5 feet behind him. "Come on, stay open." "It won't stay open, Gabriel," I said. My voice was a low, resonant vibration that cut through the hum of the cooling fans. He didn't just jump. He nearly fell out of his ergonomic chair. He scrambled back, his heels catching on the rug, his eyes wide and dilated with pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at me, a man in a black tactical jacket, eyes like flint and the stillness of a grave, and he thought the end had come. "Don't kill me," he breathed, his hands coming up in a pathetic, defensive gesture. "Please, I didn't mean to see it. I can delete it. I'll delete everything." "I'm not here to kill you," I rumbled, crossing my arms over my chest. The movement tightened the fabric over my shoulders, and I saw his eyes track the muscle. "I'm the reason you're going to survive the next hour. My name is Elias. I'm your private security detail. Your firm hired me 10 minutes after the breach was detected." He stared at me, his chest heaving. "Elias? They sent you?" "Pack a bag." I commanded. I didn't have time for his shock. 3 minutes. No electronics. No tablets, no phones, no smartwatches. If it connects to a network, it stays here. If you take it, they find us. If they find us, I have to kill people. I'd rather not do that on a Tuesday. But my work! I moved then. I didn't walk. I flowed across the room. I reached down and ripped the power cable from the back of his primary tower. The screens went black. The silence that followed was heavy. "Your work is a tombstone," I said, leaning down so I was eye level with him. I could smell the faint scent of cedar and nervous sweat on him. He was beautiful in a fragile, broken sort of way. And for some reason, the thought of that happening to him made a strange knot tighten in my stomach.
I looked out the window. Down on the street, 2 black SUVs with tinted windows were pulling a slow U-turn. They didn't have their lights on. "Time's up," I grunted. I grabbed him by the upper arm. He flinched at the contact, his skin warm under my palm. I felt the pulse in his arm, fast, irregular, terrified. I led him toward the back exit. "Head down," I hissed as we hit the basement garage. "Don't look at them. Don't look at anything but the back of my head." The extraction was a choreographed dance of violence and speed. As we hit the street in my reinforced SUV, the first hit team was already breaching the lobby. I saw the flash of suppressed muzzles in the rearview mirror. "Are they shooting at us?" Gabriel cried out from the floorboards of the back seat. "They're trying," I said, slamming the gear into sport mode and weaving through the gridlock of the midnight city. "Stay down. Don't move until I tell you to." I drove for 6 hours. I watched the city skyline dissolve into the dark rolling silhouettes of the Appalachian Mountains. Gabriel eventually fell into a fitful, twitchy sleep in the back, his head resting against the leather seat. In the pale pre-dawn light, he looked peaceful. It was a lie. There was no peace left for him. The safe house appeared as the sun began to bleed orange over the granite peaks. It was a brutalist masterpiece, a slab of concrete and reinforced glass built into the side of a cliff. I pulled the SUV into the hidden garage and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. "We're here," I said, turning in my seat. Gabriel opened his eyes. He looked out at the desolate, snow-covered landscape and then back at me. "Is this a prison or a sanctuary?" "That depends on you," I said, opening my door. "But for now, it's the only place on this planet where you're still breathing. Move, we have a perimeter to set."
The safe house was less of a home and more of a mechanical lung, breathing softly in the frozen chest of the mountains. It was a structure of cold materials, brushed steel, polished slate, and reinforced glass that felt as thick as ice. Outside, the world was a jagged wasteland of gray rock and swirling white powder. But inside, the air was filtered, recycled, and unnervingly still. For the first 48 hours, I lived by the clock. 04 a.m., perimeter check. 08 a.m., systems diagnostic. 12 p.m., nutritional intake. I treated Gabriel like a high-value asset, not a man. I kept my movements clinical. When I brought him food, I set the tray down and left without a word. When I passed him in the narrow concrete hallways, I didn't meet his eyes. I was a wall, and walls don't talk. But Gabriel was different. He was a creature of noise and connection. By the 3rd day, the silence was beginning to fracture him. I watched him on the security monitors. He would pace the living area, his fingers constantly tapping against his thighs. His eyes darted toward the windows, as if expecting the glass to shatter at any moment. He looked like a bird trapped in a silver cage, beautiful and frantic. "Elias?" I was in the server room, checking the thermal sensors when I heard his voice. It was soft, hesitant, and it vibrated through the small space. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the glowing blue lines of the monitor. "You were supposed to be in the sleeping quarters, Gabriel. The sun is down. The thermal signature of the house is higher when the lights are on." "I can't be in there anymore," he said, stepping into the room. I could smell him, clean soap, and that underlying scent of nervous adrenaline. "I can hear my own heartbeat, and it sounds like a countdown. Talk to me, please. Just say something that isn't a tactical update."
I finally turned. The blue light of the monitors caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked exhausted. The gray sweater I'd given him was too big for him. It slipped off one shoulder, exposing the pale line of his collarbone. For a second, my professional mask slipped. I saw the human being, not the target. "What do you want me to say?" I asked, my voice like gravel. "Tell me why you have a scar on your neck," he whispered, taking a step closer. "Tell me why you sleep sitting up in a chair with your boots on. Tell me who taught you that the world was so dangerous you had to stop being a person to survive it." I felt a surge of something hot and uncomfortable in my chest. Anger? Or maybe it was just the feeling of a long dormant nerve being touched. "I have a scar because I was slow in Sarajevo. I sleep with my boots on because the people who want you dead don't wait for me to tie my laces. And the world is dangerous, Gabriel. You're living proof of that. You're only alive because I'm not a person. I'm a system, and the system is working."
Gabriel didn't flinch. Instead, he took another step. He was now within my personal strike zone. I could have neutralized him in half a second. Instead, I stood frozen. "You're lying," he said. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly. His fingers hovered near my chest, right over where my heart was thumping against my ribs. "You're not a system. Systems don't have eyes that look like they've seen the end of the world. Systems don't look at me the way you did when you thought I was sleeping in the car." I grabbed his wrist before he could touch me. My grip was too firm, too reflexive. He gasped, but he didn't pull away. His skin was so warm against the cold leather of my tactical glove. The contrast was agonizing. "Don't get close to me," I warned, my thumb pressing against his pulse. It was racing. "I am a man who kills for a living. Every hand I've ever held is either a weapon or a body I'm pulling out of a fire. You don't want to be part of my world." "Maybe I'm already in it," he countered, his voice rising. "I'm in a bunker. I'm being hunted. My old life is gone, Elias. There is no normal for me to go back to. There's just this house, and there's you." I let go of his wrist as if it had burned me. I turned back to the monitors, but the data was just a blur of red and green. I could feel him standing there, his presence like a physical weight. "The storm is coming in," I said, trying to regain control of the room. "The pressure is dropping. We're going to lose the satellite uplink for a few hours. That means no external eyes. I'll be on a 20-minute patrol rotation tonight. You stay in the main hall. The fireplace is the only thing that won't show up on a long-range thermal scan." "Stay with me," he said. "I have to patrol, Gabriel." "The house is a fortress," he said, his voice pleading now. "You said it yourself. Nobody can find us. Just for an hour. Stay by the fire. I don't think I can be alone tonight. The wind, it sounds like them." I should have said no. I should have walked to the perimeter and stared into the dark until my eyes bled. But I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the raw, naked fear of a man who was losing his grip on reality. 1 hour, I growled. We sat by the fireplace in the main hall. The flames were orange and violent, casting long, flickering shadows against the concrete walls. I sat on the floor, my back against the stone, my rifle across my knees. Gabriel sat on the sofa above me. Then, after a few minutes, he slid down to the floor beside me. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, his shoulder inches from mine. The heat from the fire mixed with the cold draft from the floor, creating a strange, swirling atmosphere. "My mother used to say that the mountains were where God went to think," Gabriel said softly, staring into the embers. "I used to think that was beautiful. Now it just feels like we're being ignored." "God doesn't spend much time in places like this," I said. "Where do you go? In your head, I mean. When you're standing guard for 12 hours, where do you go to escape?" I closed my eyes for a second. I thought of the ocean, a place I hadn't seen in a decade. I don't escape. I stay exactly where I am.
If you leave your head, you leave your post, and if you leave your post, people die. You carry everyone you lost, don't you? Gabriel asked. It wasn't a jab, it was an observation. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The list of names was too long. The faces were too vivid. Elias, he whispered. I turned my head. He was leaning closer. The firelight was dancing in his eyes, making them look like liquid gold. Before I could process the movement, he leaned his head against my shoulder. My entire body went rigid. Every instinct I had told me to shove him away, to reset the distance, to maintain the vigil. But his head was heavy, and his hair was soft against my neck, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt grounded. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't a weapon. I was a man, sitting by a fire, holding up the weight of another soul. I didn't put my arm around him. I didn't move a muscle, but I didn't pull away. We sat like that for a long time, two broken things leaning against each other while the blizzard screamed outside. The wind battered the glass, trying to get in, trying to freeze us out. But for that 1 hour, the fortress wasn't a prison. It was a sanctuary. I won't let them take you, I whispered into the dark, so low I wasn't even sure if he heard me. But I heard it, and I knew that by saying it, I had finally broken the one rule that kept me alive. I had made it personal. And in my world, personal was just another word for fatal.
The storm didn't end. It just became part of the landscape. By the 7th day, the world outside the reinforced glass was a white void, an erasure of everything I once knew. Inside, the tension had reached a boiling point. The air in the bunker felt thick, like it was filled with static electricity, just waiting for a conductor. I was in the kitchen at 0312 a.m., staring at the steam arising from a black coffee I didn't want. My skin felt tight. My pulse was a rhythmic thrum in my ears. Every soldier knows the feeling, the pre-contact shiver. The vigil was about to break. I checked the monitor on the wall. The thermal sensors on the north slope were clear. The vibration sensors in the rock were silent. But then I saw it. A single pixel of white on the edge of the perimeter. A heat signature so small it could have been a rabbit. But rabbits don't move in a straight, tactical line. They're here, I whispered. The words felt like lead in my mouth. I didn't hit the alarm. I didn't want the noise to disorient Gabriel. I moved through the dark hallway like a ghost, my boots barely grazing the slate floors. I entered his room. He was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a slow, rhythmic pace that he didn't deserve to lose. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my hand over his mouth. His eyes snapped open, wide and white with terror. He started to struggle, his hands clawing at my wrist. "It's me," I hissed, leaning close so he could see my eyes. "Elias, don't make a sound. They've breached the outer fence. We have to move. Now." I saw the fear turn into a sharp, cold focus. He nodded. I pulled him out of bed. He was shivering, his breath hitching in his throat. I didn't have time to comfort him. I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the hidden staircase behind the library. "Stay behind me," I commanded. "If I start shooting, you drop to the floor and cover your head. Do not move until I touch your shoulder. Do you hear me?" "Elias, wait," he gasped as we hit the cold concrete of the lower level. "What about you? You don't have a vest on." "I have you," I said, checking the chamber of my sidearm. "That's all the motivation I need." We reached the central corridor that led to the panic room. The lights flickered. Someone had cut the main power lines. The emergency red lights hummed to life, bathing the concrete in a bloody, surreal glow. Then the sound of the glass shattering upstairs echoed through the vents. It sounded like an explosion. "Go!" I yelled. We ran. The sound of our breathing was loud in the narrow hallway. We were 50 feet from the steel door of the panic room when the first flashbang went off. The world turned into a blinding white scream.
I felt the shock wave slam into my chest, knocking the air out of my lungs. I stumbled, my vision fractured into 1,000 jagged pieces. I felt Gabriel's hand slip from my tactical vest. "Gabriel!" I roared, but my own voice sounded miles away. I saw a shadow detach itself from the darkness at the end of the hall. A man in black, a suppressed rifle leveled at the figure crawling on the floor. Gabriel. In that microsecond, 15 years of training vanished. I didn't take cover. I didn't return fire from a stable position. I launched myself across the hallway, my body a human shield. Thud, thud. The impacts felt like being hit with a sledgehammer, one in the shoulder, one in the side of my ribs. The force spun me around, but I didn't fall. Not yet. I raised my weapon and fired 4 rounds into the center mass of the shadow. The man collapsed. I hit the floor next to Gabriel, the scent of gunpowder and copper filling my nose. "Elias! No, no, no!" Gabriel was screaming now, his hands reaching for me, coming away red. "Get in the room," I wheezed, the pain beginning to bloom like an inferno under my skin. I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him the last 10 feet. I shoved him inside the steel box and collapsed over the threshold. With my last bit of strength, I pulled the heavy door shut and turned the locking wheel. Clang. The silence that followed was absolute. We were in a 6x6 steel box, safe. I slumped against the wall, my head hitting the metal with a dull thunk. Gabriel was over me in an instant, his hands frantic, ripping open my jacket. "You're bleeding so much," he sobbed, his voice echoing off the steel walls. He took off his gray sweater, the one I had given him, and pressed it against my shoulder. "Why did you do that? You stupid, brave man! Why did you jump?" I looked up at him. My vision was blurring, but I could see his face clearly. He looked beautiful, even in the red light, even covered in my blood. "I told you," I managed to say, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. "Weapons don't have hearts, but they have a purpose. My purpose was you." "Don't talk like you're dying," he snapped, his tears falling onto my cheeks. "You are not allowed to die. You hear me, Elias? You saved me. Now you have to stay and see what you saved." He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. We stayed like that for hours, huddled on the floor of a steel box while the men outside tried to find a way in. They never did. The extraction team arrived at dawn. 1 month later. The world was bright. Too bright. I sat on a wooden bench overlooking a bay in Maine. The air smelled of salt and pine needles, a far cry from the cold concrete of the bunker. My shoulder was in a sling, and every breath still felt like a reminder of the night the world almost ended. I heard the screen door of the small cottage behind me creak open. "The coffee is ready," Gabriel said. He walked out, wearing a new sweater, his face tanned by the sun. He looked like a man who had never seen a gun in his life. That was my favorite thing about him, his ability to heal. "I should go, Gabriel," I said, though I didn't move. "The trial is over. The Vane Syndicate is behind bars. My contract is officially fulfilled." Gabriel sat down next to me. He didn't look at the ocean. He looked at me. He reached out and took my hand, the one that wasn't in a sling, and laced his fingers through mine. "You've spent 15 years watching doors, Elias," he said softly, "watching for enemies, watching for threats. Don't you think it's time you started watching the sunset with someone?" I looked at our joined hands. My skin was scarred and rough. His was smooth and warm. It was an impossible match, and yet it was the only thing that felt real. "I don't know how to be a regular man, Gabriel," I admitted, my voice low. "I only know how to be a guard." "Then guard me," he whispered, leaning in until his lips were brushing mine. "Guard my heart. Stay here, in the light. I think you've earned the right to stop being a ghost." I pulled him closer, the salt air filling my lungs, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't checking the perimeter. I wasn't looking for an exit. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The vigil was over. The life had finally begun.
And that is the story of Elias and Gabriel, two men who found a sanctuary in the middle of a storm. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of bravery isn't picking up a weapon, but laying one down to let someone in. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm that Gay Stories Chronicles is a home for deep, emotional storytelling. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to hear our next epic. We're working on a secret identity story involving two rivals in a high-stakes corporate world that you won't want to miss. One final question for the comments. If you had to be stuck in a safe house for a week, who is the one person you'd want by your side? I'll be down in the comments talking to you all tonight. Thank you for being part of the Chronicles. Sleep well, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.